The United States and Japan have agreed to negotiate a reciprocal access agreement, RAA, with the Philippines amid growing tensions in the South China Sea. This agreement would allow the deployment of military forces on each other's soil, aiming to help the Philippines strengthen its defensive posture in the face of an increasingly assertive China. The move comes as a response to escalating tensions between the Philippines and China, with the recent collision of Chinese ships with Philippine vessels in the South China Sea. The Philippines and Japan are also looking to expand their military ties, with Japan being the first recipient of the Philippines' new Official Security Assistance Program. Additionally, the U.S. and its allies have stepped up military readiness in the region, as evidenced by joint military exercises and increased troop deployment. These efforts reflect a broader strategy to counter the perceived threat posed by China in the Indo-Pacific region. What is the role of Japan in the South China Sea dispute? Japan is not a direct participant in the South China Sea disputes, but it has a significant stake in the region due to its strategic, diplomatic, and economic interests. Japan opposes any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force in the South China Sea, and has consistently advocated upholding the rule of law at sea. Although not among the claimants, Japan has deepened security ties with several Southeast Asian claimant nations and has contested China's maritime claims in the region, including rejecting China's claim of territorial sea baselines. Japan's involvement in the South China Sea reflects its commitment to peace, stability, and the rule of law in the region, as well as its efforts to counteract actions that increase regional tensions. As tensions escalate in the contested South China Sea between the Philippines and China, signals suggest that the Ferdinand Marcos Jr. administration is inclined towards finalizing a reciprocal access agreement with Japan. According to a Filipino National Security Council (NSC) official, as reported on December 18th by various media outlets, the Philippines aims to sign the Reciprocal Access Agreement (RAA) with Japan. However, the Marcos government has yet to announce a definitive schedule for the agreement. Jonathan Malaya, NSC Assistant Director General, highlighted the mutual interest of Manila and Tokyo in promptly sealing the agreement, emphasizing its potential to significantly enhance their maritime cooperation. He explained that once signed, the RAA would streamline procedures and establish guidelines for Philippine forces visiting Japan for training and joint exercises, and vice versa. This move comes after both countries agreed to initiate negotiations for a reciprocal access agreement earlier in the year, prompted by mounting regional tensions and in response to their shared challenge in dealing with China. Gilberto Teodoro, the Philippines' Defense Secretary, expressed Manila's eagerness to expedite the agreement with Japan concerning the sharing of military forces within each other's territories. Teodoro stressed that any such pact would necessitate ratification by both Japan's and the Philippines' legislatures. We look forward to this reciprocal access agreement between both our countries, given the commitment of the Japanese government and the Philippine government to preserve the rules-based international order and international law, remarked Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro during a press briefing. Reports indicated that representatives from the Philippines Department of National Defense, Department of Foreign Affairs, and Department of Justice commenced formal discussions for the RAA in Tokyo towards the end of November. The Second Thomas Shoal, a contested area in the South China Sea, has emerged as a focal point of concern. Positioned approximately 190 kilometers off Palawan Island's western coast, the resource-rich shoal is claimed by China as part of its territory within the South China Sea. Manila fears potential Chinese aggression to assert control over the shoal. The Philippines maintains a grounded warship named Sierra Madre, functioning as a military outpost in the region. Recent incidents have seen the Philippines Coast Guard (PCG) ships conducting reinforcement missions for the military vessel being targeted by Chinese Coast Guard (CCG) ships using water cannons. Tensions escalated in late October when a Philippine Coast Guard (PCG) craft and a military-run supply boat faced aggression from a Chinese Coast Guard ship and an accompanying vessel near a disputed shoal claimed by both parties. Amid these confrontations, Beijing continues to propagate a narrative portraying Manila as the provocateur. In this context of rising tensions, the Philippines has garnered support from allies like the United States, which has unequivocally pledged to defend the Southeast Asian country against potential Chinese aggression. Despite this support, the geographical proximity between Japan and the Philippines has made fostering a deeper friendship with Tokyo a pragmatic choice, especially considering the shared concerns over China's assertiveness. Moreover, China's aggressive stance not only affects Manila but also impacts Tokyo, given Beijing's intimidation of Taiwan, a self-governing island that Japan perceives as crucial to its own security due to its geographical proximity. Japan and the Philippines have been steadily strengthening their partnership. Earlier reports highlighted Japan's intent to allocate its inaugural grant for security cooperation to the Philippines, aimed at bolstering the defensive capabilities of regional allies. This new form of aid will extend to militaries of nations considered friendly by Tokyo and deemed pivotal to Japan's security, providing equipment to support law-based security and peace initiatives. Japan isn't the sole focus of the Marcos administration's efforts to fortify defense ties against an increasingly assertive China encroaching upon disputed territories. The commentary from China's People's Daily specifically highlighted the actions of the Philippines in the vicinity of Second Thomas Shoal, an area abundant in resources that Manila occupies, but which China claims as its own territory. Blaming the United States for allegedly encouraging what it termed as provocative actions by the Philippines in the region, China's People's Daily asserted that such actions were exacerbating tensions in the area in an irresponsible manner. According to the editorial, penned under the pseudonym Zhongsheng, or Voice of China, the Philippines is accused of relying on external support while disregarding China's efforts at goodwill and restraint. It claimed that the Philippines repeatedly challenges China's principles and boundaries. The editorial highlighted concerns about the dangerous nature of the Philippines' behavior, stating that it has significantly disrupted regional peace, stability, prosperity, and development. Equipped with state-of-the-art aircraft, missile defense systems, and a legacy of excellence, the Carl Vinson represents a cornerstone of American military strength. Contrastingly, the China carrier, a symbol of rising naval power, emerges as a formidable contender in this standoff. With its cutting-edge technology and sheer scale, it signifies China's ambitions in the region. The China-Philippines conflict intensifies as these two giants maneuver strategically, impacting the delicate balance of power in the South China Sea. Analysts speculate on the ramifications of this historic standoff and its potential reverberations across international relations and global security. The USS Carl Vinson is a supercarrier of the United States Navy, while the Chinese aircraft carrier involved in the South China Sea dispute is the Fujian, the third aircraft carrier of the People's Liberation Army Navy. The rising tensions between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea have led to a maritime standoff, with China increasing pressure on the Philippines in the disputed waters. The USS Carl Vinson is not directly involved in the China-Philippines conflict, but the United States has a defense treaty with the Philippines that could draw it into a potential conflict with China. The USS Carl Vinson is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier named in honor of Congressman Carl Vinson of Georgia. The Chinese aircraft carrier Fujian, also known as the Type 003 carrier, is the third aircraft carrier of China and was launched on June 17, 2022. It is expected to be considerably more advanced than China's previous carriers, with a displacement of roughly 80,000 tons and a catapult-assisted takeoff but arrested recovery (Catabar) launch system. However, it is still conventionally powered, unlike the nuclear-powered carriers of the United States. The South China Sea dispute involves territorial claims by multiple countries, including the Philippines and China. The United States has a defense treaty with the Philippines, which could draw it into a potential conflict with China. The dispute has led to rising tensions and a maritime standoff, with China increasing its pressure on the Philippines in the disputed waters. What is the role of the U.S. in the China-Philippines conflict? The United States has a significant role in the China-Philippines conflict, particularly in the context of its defense treaty with the Philippines. The U.S. has reaffirmed its support for the Philippines in the face of the escalating tensions in the South China Sea, warning Beijing that it would defend its ally in the event of an armed attack under the 1951 U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty. The U.S. has also been urged to undertake sharper responses to deter further Chinese escalation in the region. The U.S. position on the conflict underscores its commitment to upholding the Mutual Defense Treaty and supporting the Philippines in the face of what it deems as dangerous actions by China in the disputed waters. The U.S. support for the Philippines is a key factor in the dynamics of the China-Philippines conflict, as it could potentially draw the U.S. into the conflict due to its defense treaty obligations with the Philippines. It is not uncommon for U.S. aircraft carriers to make port calls at Singapore, a traditional regional ally of the United States. The media was invited to cover the docking of the carrier strike group in Singapore, but officials did not reveal where the nuke-powered war machine was headed. The aircraft carrier Vinson was reportedly accompanied by ships from the United States Carrier Strike Group 1 fleet, comprising guided missile destroyers and a missile cruiser. These ships are generally stationed in California when not sailing the world on operational missions. Questions of foreign policy and future operations, I would refer those questions to our higher headquarters. Nikkei quoted Rear Adm. Carlos Sardiello as saying, "I can tell you Carrier Strike 1 has trained and rehearsed to be ready, both lethal and survivable, and we're able to conduct our full range of operations in support of higher headquarters tasking." One of just 11 active aircraft carriers in the Navy, USS Carl Vinson is the third Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier based in San Diego, California. The vessel can carry around 60 assault fighter planes, helicopters, and other aircraft, all of which can take off and land on the carrier at sea. Although United States officials described the latest docking as routine, the presence of the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the region comes at a precarious time. Tensions have escalated between U.S. ally Philippines and China in recent months, with the latter reportedly confronting and bullying Filipino ships on missions to reinforce the disputed Second Thomas Shoal. Since China claims almost the entirety of the South China Sea, it often carries out missions aimed at dissuading other claimants in the region from operating in the disputed territory. However, the confrontations between these two states, which were previously very far and few, have become more frequent in recent months. In fact, in recent months, the Philippines Coast Guard, PCG, ships carrying out reinforcement missions for the military vessel have been attacked by the Chinese Coast Guard CCG ships, which often train water cannons on them. The crisis came to a head in late October when a Chinese Coast Guard ship and an escorting vessel attacked a Philippine Coast Guard PCG craft and a military-run supply boat off a shoal that both parties claimed. In addition to these potentially violent exchanges, Beijing keeps peddling the narrative that Manila is inciting them. Thus, the presence of a U.S. carrier at this time has been interpreted as signaling to China. Days after Chinese vessels intimidated and obstructed the passage of Filipino Coast Guard ships in late October, U.S. President Joe Biden reiterated his ironclad defense commitment to the Philippines. He warned Beijing that the U.S. would come to the Philippines' support in case of an attack in the South China Sea, SCS. Earlier this month, during a resupply trip to BRP Sierra Madre, Philippine vessels were targeted by China Coast Guard, CCG ships with water cannons, and one of them was rammed. After suffering severe damage from the Chinese high-intensity water cannon strike, one of the two supply boats, the ML Calayan, had to be pulled back to port. After this, Chinese ships conducted a rare invasion of Second Thomas Shoal in the West Philippine Sea as a calculated show of force by Beijing, after upsetting a Philippine resupply mission in the same waters, according to a maritime security expert. Up to 11 Chinese marine militia vessels were spotted in the Philippine-held shoal one day after the tense supply run. Against that backdrop, the U.S. carrier's timing to make a statement by docking in the region is noteworthy. Singapore, for one, shares a cordial relationship with the U.S. and is acquiring F-35 stealth jets from U.S. defense giant Lockheed Martin. However, the U.S. carrier has not visited Manila recently, even though it has done so in the past. For instance, another Nimitz-class U.S. aircraft carrier, USS Ronald Reagan, CVN-76, arrived in Manila in late October. At the time, the aircraft carrier was joined by Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers, USS Robert Smalls, CG-62, and USS Antietam, CG-54. U.S. carriers are sailing volatile regions. It is typical of the U.S. Navy to send its aircraft carriers, the backbone of its naval fleet, to volatile zones as a means of deterrence and power projection to its adversaries. The carriers sail far seas in peacetime, but mainly during some tensions, as is currently evident in the SCS. The last time a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier docked in Singapore was when the USS Nimitz made a port call in the Southeast Asian country in January. Before that, USS Ronald Reagan made a brief visit in July 2022, after which it quickly headed to the Philippine Sea to safeguard House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who was in Taiwan in early August 2022. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates and analysis on global events.